Connor O'Gara. You can follow on Twitter at CJ. Ooh, I just had it there. CJ O'Gara on Twitter to get all of his latest stuff and news. And, of course, at Saturday Down South. Connor, appreciate you joining us as always at this time slot here on Monday. And I've been following along with Saturday Down South and seeing what y'all been putting out here of late. And it's a lot of college baseball, which is great for the sport, great for the SEC, and great for the growth of college baseball. And I've seen this question thrown out multiple times around the Twitterverse about Tennessee, because I think most 99% of people outside of the Volunteer State are pretty happy to jump on them right now, to really rag them for their arrogance, the attitudes. I mean, last segment I talked about the arguing of a pitch on a 1-0 count is the equivalent of going to a restaurant, ordering a Coke, they say, is Pepsi okay, and you flipping the table. Like, it is over the top. But do you think it's been good for college baseball? Because, as we all know, the best stories have really good villains.
I think it has been good. And that's not to say that I support everything that Tennessee baseball does or is about. But from an interest standpoint, absolutely. I mean, Tennessee was trending nationally within minutes of that game ending yesterday. And let's just say they were not words of congratulations. Like, there were more people than I can remember excited to see a team lose than any in terms of the big revenue sports. I just can't remember anything quite like that in recent memory. I mean, I guess Duke this past year in the NCAA tournament with Coach K and the retirement tour, but like, you know, Duke has its supporters as well. Duke has a national fan base. It doesn't feel like Tennessee has a national fan base. It just feels like it has a national group of haters, and understandably so. Like, that's what they pretty much brought upon themselves. If you're going to be the team that has the daddy hat, the cheetah coat, you're going to yell at opposing dugouts. You're going to have, you're going to flip the bird around in first base. You're going to pimp home runs. Like, this is just, I mean, this is what you would expect of a team that gets upset in a spot like that in terms of a reaction. I think that it would have been fascinating to see them in Omaha, but I'm sure that, like, secretly, as much as there are a lot of opposing fan bases, maybe Arkansas included, who are happy to see them go because of their ways, they're also happy to see them go because they were clearly the best team in the country up until this weekend. And when you only lose 7 games up until a super regional, there's a sigh of relief. There has to be for everybody that's already punched their ticket to Omaha.
Oh, you're definitely right about that. While it's a lot of pointing and laughing, it's also back of your mind, oh, thank goodness somebody got him, because I don't know if we could have done it ourselves. But when it comes to Tennessee and kind of just the fan base in general, I mean, in less than a full year, we've had 2 incidents at Tennessee athletic events of trash being thrown at the field. Is this something that the higher-ups at the University of Tennessee and possibly even Greg Sankey needs to get involved with? Because we see it happen every now and then at certain institutions, and you can always blame it. You can say, oh, there's few bad apples in everybody. Like, they don't represent the entire fan base. But now that we're getting into the territory of multiple different events of trash throwing onto the field, is this something that needs to be looked at more and could possibly punish Tennessee in some way? Because you can't just throw things. Like, these are lessons that we think that everybody knows, but apparently we have to continue to teach people.
Yeah, look, not giving them a pass, I don't think they're alone in the throwing stuff onto the playing field argument, right? Like, I mean, I remember being at the national championship this past year, and Georgia had I can't remember which call it was. I think it was whether or not it was Stetson Bennett, like, interception, fumble, or something like that. And when it was ruled in Alabama's favor in Georgia, there was a few Georgia fans who were throwing beers down. That's a national championship at a neutral site game. And I remember all the Tennessee fans coming out of the woodwork saying, "Oh, I thought Tennessee fans were the only ones." Like, I don't want to just single out Tennessee fans. Yeah, I mean, it's not a great look. Like, let's call it what it is. I think we're talking about pretty special circumstances here. The Kiffin reunion, of course, with the most infamous mustard bottle ever, infamous golf ball. The objects on that field were just
it's weird.
A collection, all-time collection of just stuff stuff gathered on a field. But, I mean, think about the circumstances surrounding that. Think about the circumstances surrounding this. I don't think you necessarily bank on something like that happening moving forward. Greg Sankey had the reprimand after. I can't remember the amount that got fined after the Ole Miss game with Lane Kiffin, but I'm sure there will be something said behind closed doors. But like, what's that really going to do in the heat of the moment, season on the line? We saw it. Tennessee was a good example. Like, tempers flare. That's just the way it is. The Drew Gilbert situation, the way that played out. I think that in a perfect world, you could have your commissioner step in and nip this in the bud. But is it going to do anything? Are fans going to have that in the back of their mind when things don't go their way in the heat of the moment? No. So I don't really think anything's going to be done.
Unfortunately, you're right. I think in the heat of the moment, people won't be able to restrain themselves while they definitely should. Just good functioning members of society, you should know not to throw things at people. It's stuff that this is stuff that my fiance teaches to her kindergarten class. And it's just absurd that we continue to see this behavior spill into sports and just into society in general. I don't mean to go on a soapbox, but we just got to remember that just because we're passionate and really involved into something doesn't just give people the opportunity and the right to just do whatever they want. So I'll leave it at that. And I do want to ask about the other teams in the SEC. So now that Tennessee is out, who is your favorite going into Omaha from the SEC faction? I would think it's probably A&M or Arkansas.
Yeah, and look, I'm not as admittedly, I'm not as dialed into college baseball as many are. And Joe Cox did such a great job covering the sport for us on Saturday on South.com. But I think the A&M story is really interesting. Not to I realize the airways that I'm on right now, and nobody would be surprised to see Arkansas as the last team standing in Omaha. But at the same time, I think what's happened in College Station is fascinating. The hire that Ross Bjork made last year to go over to TCU, get one of the most respected coaches in the game, Jim Schlossnagle, and turn that team, which was in last place in the SEC West, into a division champ, and now an Omaha-bound squad. That's the type of thing where I think we all assume that athletic directors are going to have the team's best interest at heart. They're going to make the tough decisions, but A&M was a perfectly fine, respected program. They had 13 consecutive trips to the NCAA tournament, and it finally comes to an end. And then they make a decision to move on and to bring in a big time hire. I think you look at what A&M has done this past year in this quick turnaround, and the fact that they're a program that is really feeling confident going into the College World Series, having just swept their super regional and kind of been this hey, nobody really saw this coming, but to do this in year one with a new coach is just amazing. It just kind of goes to show you that's why you make the big time moves like that. And, Schlossnagle has 11 College World Series victories, which at least last year at the time he was hired was tied for the most among active coaches. So you got to feel good about your chances just to get in the field. But, Tennessee's a good example of anything can happen. There's a reason we haven't seen a top overall seed win it all since Miami in 1999. It just comes down to a few bounces of the ball, and Tennessee left 2 fastballs up high late innings, and that was pretty much all she wrote for that team yesterday. Otherwise, we're having a very different conversation right now. So yeah, I would probably say A&M is the one that really intrigues me, but obviously Arkansas getting there and having this momentum, doing it anywhere, anytime, that's certainly going to bode well in Omaha.
We're talking with Connor O'Gara from Saturday Down South. Connor, I do want to ask you a few football questions before we let you go. Now that the official agreement has been reached with Cincinnati, Houston, and Central Florida to leave the AAC after the 2022 calendar year and begin to play in the summer of 2023, how is that going to affect the landscape of college football? Does this mean that they move up Texas OU? Does BYU jump aboard, or is this just it was eventually going to happen? Might as well make it now.
Yeah, BYU's already coming on board for 2023, so that doesn't impact that. That's why the move kind of made sense to get all 3 of those teams on board. I think Texas and Oklahoma stay in the Big 12 through the 2024 season, and then they come on board to the SEC in 2025. The point that I've been making is that there's really no sense of urgency from Greg Sankey's standpoint now that the playoff looks like it's going to stay at 4 through the 2025 season, and who knows beyond that. Remember, that's not imminent. That expansion is happening. And so I think if you look at it from that standpoint, you're like, well, if we're going to have a 14 playoff, what sense of urgency does the SEC have to have a 16-team super conference when, really the SEC has been doing just fine with a 14-team conference and being able to get one and or two teams into the field on a yearly basis. You don't want to cannibalize yourself necessarily by adding Texas and Oklahoma and paying what would be, probably 5 times as much what those AAC schools paid to get into the Big 12 early, where it was $18 million, and we're talking about a 9-figure deal that it would take for Texas and Oklahoma to come on board. So those new media contracts are going to be through the roof with them coming to the SEC. So I wouldn't necessarily think that's the point of concern. The deal's already done, so it's happening. It's not like they need to make this happen this year or else the deal can fall through or something like that. So I think that they're going to stay kind of where they're at. And, I don't really know that it changes the dynamics of college football that much. It allows the Big 12 to be able to survive and allows them to actually have a little bit of a presence because of the momentum that Cincinnati has, the momentum that UCF has, and then obviously Houston, if it's going to contend like this with Dana Holgorsen, I think that kind of changes things for what we see them in the state of Texas. So, I don't know that it changes the overall dynamics otherwise, besides just keeping the Power 5 sort of intact for the time being.
Mm-hmm. Last thing here for you, Connor. Saw Brett McMurphy earlier technically last week, tweet out about that. Apparently, Arkansas is the last Outback Bowl champion. No more Outback Bowl. What's going on there?
Yeah, they changed the name. I'm blanking on the name right now, but yeah, the fact that there's no more Outback Bowl and we can't get Cole Kublik, my guy, just housing a blooming onion on the sideline. What a tragedy for sports in general, for society. I think
it truly
that.
is.
What a shame that is. But yeah, the image that I'll always have of the Outback Bowl is either Sam Pittman, getting carried by his players, maybe John Daly practicing some kicks on the sideline. Like that's what we need. Cole obviously, housing the blooming onion. That's what I will choose to remember about the Outback Bowl. I'm going to continue to call it that, and they can't tell me otherwise. To me, it's one of the great sponsorships ever. Coconut shrimp versus blooming onion. This is the type of way to bring the average consumer into a bowl game who keeps saying, oh, bowl games don't matter, bowl games don't matter. That game mattered, and it mattered when you went to your Outback Steakhouse, your local fine establishment, and said, hey, I'm owed a free coconut shrimp or a free blooming onion. The fact that we're not going to have that anymore, it's a loss. It's a tough time in our country's history, but I think we're going to find a way to pull through.
I hope we do, Connor, because just like you, I'm quite sad, and I'll always remember the good times that were had in Tampa with the Outback Bowl. Connor, appreciate you joining us. We'll talk to you next week.
Partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, including updated odds on the NBA playoffs, fights, and even next season's futures. And don't forget that the MLB is back as well. Who are you picking to win the World Series? BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino and poker games. It's super easy to get started, so head to the website today or use your mobile device to join and use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts.